So I was going to give a quick live coding session running through using Cypress as what I kind of call a development tool, which is effectively just, instead of just opening up a browser and making a change to see what happens, using Cypress to do it for you. It lets you write tests inline while you're developing a little more seamlessly. But before we get started, I should probably introduce myself. So this is my talk, using Cypress as a dev tool without losing your mind. Your host, Justin Boyson, me. It occurred to me, after I came up with that title and hosted the Meetup, I found a much better title, and I wanted to share it with you anyway. So alternatively, this talk is also Dr. Strange View, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Integration Testing. So who am I? I'm Justin Boyson. I'm a senior front-end engineer at GitLab. You can find me on Twitter at Uncle Justin. I don't tweet a lot, but I do retweet and like a madman. So you can kind of use me as an aggregator if you like. Before we begin, I'll give a quick overview of Cypress. Real quick, does anybody use Cypress at all? Oh, you have, okay. So I'm gonna make up a lot of stuff. Just keep it between us. The rest of it have no idea that I'm bullshitting the whole way through. Excuse my language. So Cypress is just Chrome plus some fancy testing helpers make your life amazing. And the fact that it's basically Chrome with a wrapper on it is why you can use it as a dev tool as a front-end developer. Cypress as a testing tool gives you some pretty neat things to help you testing, which are also kind of different than you might be used to. For one, it has inferred assertions. That means when you use Cypress, you'll see later to extract something from the DOM. If it can't find it, it'll throw an exception. It assumes that if you ask for something, you're expecting it to be there. So it kind of throws people off sometimes. When you'll look at a test that doesn't have any expectations written because they're inferred because I've said, load this page, find me an H1 tag that says hello. That is your test. If it doesn't find it, your test failed, and off you go. It also gives you auto waits for resolution. It has built-in timeout functions because it knows it's in a web browser and most of your tests are going to be asynchronous. All of its functions are promise-based, and they do not actually return elements, which can be a little tricky. We'll touch on that later on in the talk. I'm also going to be using an add-on for Cypress called Testing Library. Testing Library adds some really nice ways to interact with the DOM in a more human-type form, and it gives you some extra assertions to make you kind of let you reason about more like you would a person. It lets you kind of talk to the browser as you would a human being, instead of saying something like, go find, dot title CSS and assert that it has some text in it. You can just say, make sure this text is on the page effectively. Because in my opinion, you probably shouldn't be mixing CSS styling cues with your testing. You'll see that a lot in a lot of tutorials, and I really disagree with it. I don't think you should be using CSS to hunt down DOM tags because you're marrying your logic to something that could change. Like if you're using Bootstrap for your styling, you switch over to material design, and half your integration tests break. It's kind of a bad thing. One minor hiccup when using Cypress as your dev tools, it doesn't support Vue DevTools yet. This is actually a known issue with Vue DevTools. Doesn't support iframes very well. They are working on it. There is it's on the milestone, I believe, for Vue DevTools 5, which is like 2 more major revisions away. It is an open source project. If you want to contribute and fix that, we would all be very thankful. Having said that, I haven't really noticed that a problem very often. I actually find that I personally don't go into Vue DevTools a whole lot once I'm beyond the discovery period of whatever it is I'm working on. I'm actually just plugging away. I don't normally need to go in and look at state or inspect the component in its process itself. And there's ways around it if you have to. What are we building? We're going to build a very simple to-do app. When I was doing some practice runs on this throughout the week, I had a way more grandiose application to build. And when I timed it the first time, it came in at a little over an hour. And I didn't want to make you guys sit here and watch me code for an hour. And I don't want to do that either. So now we're doing a to-do app, which is way simpler. It's going to add to-dos. It'll list the to-dos. You'll be able to delete to-dos. And you'll be able to impress your friends when you're done with this. All right, let's get started. So to save a little bit of time, I've already run a Vue create app. So I haven't added any code here yet. This is just the default app that Vue spits out for you when you run Vue create something. Normally when you would run this app, the first thing to do is jump in here and run npm run serve and start hacking away. I get a slightly different approach and jump into using Cypress instead. And I use yarn, so I'm going to button for punishment. Yarn run test E to E. This is going to do is going to build the website like it always does when you run serve, then it's going to run a Cypress instance and let you launch that. It takes a minute to compile, so I'll try and yes, thank you for that. I can make it much bigger. I always forget. Thank you for telling me. We're not going to need that either. Is that good? Cool. So when Cypress runs, it gives you this little application sort of thing that has a list of all the tests that are written. When you first run view create application, if you select end-to-end tests as one of your features, it will create a test for you, which is this file right here. So you can see where they go. It always puts them into this test folder, E2E specs, test.js, and this is the default test that it gives you without typing anything else. So if I click that file, it's going to run those tests and launch the Cypress controlled instance. There it is, just like you're used to seeing. Again, this is a real browser, so you can go in here and click and interact with it just like you would a regular browser. It does have regular dev tools, just not the Chrome dev tools. So let's look at our test real quick. So this test is pretty simple. It goes through and it runs cy.visit, which is just kind of telling Cypress, go visit this page, which is the home page. And then it's looking for an H1 tag with the text, welcome to your Vue.js app. One of the neat things about Cypress is it kind of maintains a state as it goes. So as you hover over this bar on the left-hand side, you can see what the DOM looked like at that given point when it was trying to run these different commands. So here we have our visit that you saw on test.js that contains an H1 tag, welcome to your Vue.js app. And you see it's highlighted because that's what it found. So let's go ahead and start updating our app to make our to-do app. And the first thing I want to do is make a to-do list component. Forgive me, I'm still learning how to type and talk at the same time. Not very well, because I keep stop talking. Create a component. I usually like to keep my components really simple, just for a sanity check, not have them do anything right away. To do list, save that. We'll go into our app, get rid of these things that we don't need anymore. List, and we'll bring in our to-do list components. I do a lot of shortcuts in VS Code. If you could do me a favor, I have a hard enough time staying on track when I'm typing coding at the same time. Write those down and ask me later if you want to know what any of those things are. I will stop and answer you and lose track of where I am. Right. We'll save our application and go see that it refreshes. There we go. It's reloaded. Now, at first this kind of took me aback because you notice that it didn't rerun the tests again, but that actually is pretty nice. When you're in here hacking around and trying to use it, it would be pretty frustrating if every time you made a change, it kept rerunning the entire testing suite. So the fact that it doesn't is actually pretty cool. But I can go in here and rerun these tests right now and see that it's going to break. You'll notice that it timed out after just a little over 4 seconds. Again, with that asynchronous nature, it's assuming there might be data loading, you might be making an API call, so it's going to wait a little bit and see if it resolves itself until it times out. In this case, it didn't, because obviously we've changed the value to to-do list. And this is actually kind of neat. This is a kind of made-up sort of example, but if you can think if you were working on a real application and you spooled it up and started making changes, this is nice because it catches you very quickly in something you may have introduced a regression test, and now you're going to know immediately while you made a change. Oftentimes you get way down the pipe and everything's working for your scenario, you push it up to master, and now you've introduced a regression production, everybody's upset with you. Kind of staying this modality of living inside of Cypress can save you a little bit. Let's go fix our test and make Cypress happy. In this case, it's pretty simple. We can just change this to to-do list and save it. If you save the test file, it does rerun the tests. Oh, didn't find it. What did I do wrong?
You don't have an H1.
Thank you. Excellent catch. So let's go ahead and fix that. Actually, I'm going to fix that in a slightly different way. I don't like that I have to have it in an H1 tag. And I don't like telling my testing suite, go find an H1 tag and put it in there. I mean, it can make sense if you have that as an explicit requirement, like say, make sure to-do list shows up in a header, and you know your header is always going to be in a header tag. Sure, you could do that. In this case, I'm going to say my requirement just needs to say to-do list somewhere on the app, and I want to change it. So I'm going to grab that testing library that we talked about earlier. And testing library / Cypress. We'll let that guy install. While that's installing, I'm going to give myself a couple of nice-to-haves in here. If you're not aware, you can make VS Code autocomplete things it doesn't know about by adding types to it in a reference. So here I'm going to give it a Cypress reference and a reference to a testing library Cypress. And all that's going to do for me is let VS Code give me autocompletes now. So now when I go in here, I'm going to change the CY contains. I'm going to use one of the queries that's built in the testing library, which is called get by text. It's more of that human way of talking to your tests, like I mentioned before. So we got CY get by text, and now I can just feed it a string. Also, as an aside, I prefer to use regular expressions when I'm searching for strings because I can explicitly state them to be case insensitive like I am here, and it sets me up for more fancy searches later on if I need to. For example, I'm pretty sure testing libraries get by text is case insensitive by default. Cypress's get tags are not. So if you go in there and I say look for to-do list with a capital L and you change it to a lowercase l, your test is going to break again in a way that's not very meaningful. So I've updated my test. Rerun our tests again. I always forget that too. You need to go in and add, I should say, the testing library is actually in a command edition for Cypress, so you need to add it to Cypress's commands. There's actually a bunch of these that are out there in the wild that you can go find that are pretty nice. Do that, and that should pick it up and rerun it for me. It's kind of like a plugin. Cool, there we go. So now I've got my get by test, and it found my to-do list without hunting for the H1, and Cypress is happy. Great. Oh man, I don't know if you've ever used View or Zoom before, but if you accidentally hover too close to the bar, it jumps up and will not leave you alone. Okay, it's out of the way. I got a tiny laptop. I've done the best I could here. It's out of the way as best as I can. Cool. So let's go finish working on our to-do app a little bit more. So I've got my header. The first thing I'm going to want to do is be able to add a to-do, which means I'm probably going to want a form. So I'll create a form. Go ahead and do a submit.prevent so it doesn't refresh the page. Doesn't need to do anything just yet because I'm just building out a static form as a placeholder. Go button, we'll say add to do. Let's go ahead and make that a submit button. Save. We'll look at our screen, we'll refresh eventually. It shows we have our to do button. So to make that interactive, I want to make it so when I type something in and click to do, it will actually do something, right? So let's create some logic. Do data, and we'll do a to object. We'll do a to-dos array to store all our to-dos, and we're going to need to do text for the text that we want to submit. I'll go ahead and create a method right now while I'm up here for add to do, so that it will do something. Add to do will receive the text itself. This is just going to be a straight push onto that array. So this to-dos.push, simple object text. And I also want to clear out the to-do text when I'm done. So we're ready to start a new to-do. We'll wire that guy up. No, sorry, you get to listen to me breathe and type for a little bit. I apologize. I wish I could tell jokes while I do this. Feel free to inject your own. Cool. Right. Boom. Looks like it worked because it cleared the text field out. but I'm going to be able to see it show up a little bit. So I'll use the complete for v4 to do into do's. V4 has told me give me a very good idea to store an ID in there. I like to use UUID for my IDs. Just because I usually use Firebase for stuff like this, and it uses a big GUID instead of an incrementing ID, so just got in the habit. I'm sorry? Yeah, it's going to, to iterate over the to-dos? Oh, yeah, just using the default. I believe it is version 4. In this case, I'm not going to get too crazy with it. This is going to be a gibberish, I think, like 20-character GUID. Yeah, just a randomly generated GUID, so I don't have to worry about trying to increment something myself and keep that logic out of here. Boom. Cool. That should satisfy everybody so that we can. Oops, oh, sorry, we're still reloading. Cool. So it's adding our list. So what I did there to kind of test it is what we all would normally do. You're going to write some logic, write some code, and you go in here manually and you type in some stuff, and then you do it, you look at it and say, great, that worked. Now, how can we make Cypress do that for us? So we go back to my test. Let's start a new test inside of the file here. We'll say adds a to-do. And so kind of trying to think through it like you would tell a human tester to test it, we need to give Cypress commands. So I wanted to go find that input, type something into it, and then click the button. So for Cypress, it's going to be cy.get by. I'm going to use label text here. This is another function from testing library. It lets you grab input elements by the label that is attached to them. One of the things I like about it is it kind of enforces best practices where in order to have your website be more accessible for, say, screen readers and whatnot, you should have a label attached to all of your forms. And testing library is smart enough that it'll even trigger off the ARIA label, which I'll show you here in just a second. I'll call this to-do text. But once it's got it, I can type. We'll call this to-do 1. And afterwards, I want to get that button. So again, we'll do get by text. And my text was just what, add to do. And once we have that button, we will click it. Does that look right? Cool. Save that. And it'll fail because I haven't added a label to my input yet. Again, Cypress is nice. It gives you really nice error messages. But it tells you exactly what happened and exactly where it happened. Unable to find a label with the text of to-do-text. Let's go fix our app. Because I don't actually want the label to be seen, I'm going to add an ARIA label to text. Save. I'll rerun my test. Cool, and it worked. So there's Cypress, went in there, found the elements you needed, added the text, clicked the button, just like a human being would do. And it's already given us those built-in assertions like we said. It was because by the very nature of saying, go find a text box with this label, you guarantee that you have a label for that text box with the name that you're expecting. It's pretty cool. Same thing with the button. There should be a button there. It's already asserting that all that is there. You know, I'm actually going to fix this label a little bit because it's supposed to be a human-readable label, not a machine-readable label. So do text. And we'll fix this guy. Broke my own rule for using regex too. Save that, and that should still be okay. Excellent. So the next thing we want to assert that makes sure this worked right is I said, we want to make sure that the to-do showed up in a list and that the text box itself was cleared out. So the first one we'll do is we'll check the text box. So I've already got my selector and just copy and paste him. And what I want to do here is say, I want this should have value equal to an empty string. And let's do a get by text. We're looking for that to do 1. I'm actually going to extract this out into a constant because we're going to use it later. This is close. How did that sneak in there? Ah, it's live coding, kids. Cool. Save our test and see if I made any mistakes. It worked. Now, if you go in here on the left bar and you click through it, you can see all the steps that it did. So first it found a label by text, it typed it to do. Also, you'll notice when you look in here that the text box is empty. It's got that snapshot of the DOM before that happened. We type it to do, finds a text, finds a button by its text. It clicks that. You see a little hot point showing up on the screen. Oh, this is going to need to. If you stay hovered on it, it's showing you a before and after in that particular state that it's hovered on. Then it's going to look for the label text again, assert that it has an empty value, and it's going to try and find the text that we said to do one, and it found it. So now our add to do is completely tested. It's working like a champ. Now, if I hadn't been talking, and I'm pretty comfortable with Cypress now, it wouldn't have taken me that much longer to do that in line with actually coding that up. You know, whereas if I had written the whole thing initially and then had to go back and find it one at a time, I probably would have started coding some things. I might have gotten stumped by the ARIA label, whatever. And I'm not thinking through the code as much as I would if I'm just blindly coding at it. Like the label thing got me when I was doing my first run through here. It's pretty neat that it did. As soon as I went to grab the input, I was like, oh man, how do I grab that input? I didn't give myself any meaningful way to do it. How would I tell a human being to go click that input? I could search for any input, but then what if I have more than one? So you kind of think through your process a little better. It's kind of a neat. That's my favorite thing about trying to test as I go is it makes me think through my product a little better. And you also notice that I'm not doing hardcore like test-driven development either. I'm not writing my tests first. I'm still coding like I prefer. So I'm not sure what the features I want yet. That's one of the big complaints that I hear a lot when people talk about testing is, well, I don't know what I need to test until I build it. Well, you can build it. And then since it's right there in front of you ready to go, you lose the pain of having to shut it down, spool up your testing environment, and then write tests. You're more likely to do it in real time. It's much simpler. So let's add another contrived example. I'm going to add a duplicate to do and see if it will add more than one and still be happy. Anybody think it's going to work? It's not. Any ideas why it's about to fail? It's because I'm doing to do one twice. This is one of the things that gets people when they first start working with Cypress and testing library is that these DOM selectors are very explicit, and the built-in assertions are also very explicit. So it's saying, when I'm saying get by text this string value, it's expecting only one and only one of those unique value. Because I've done it 2 times, it's going to fail. And then when you look in here, it actually is very intentional in its explanation of what's happening. It said, hey, I found multiple elements. If this is intentional, use one of the other queries. So it's telling you right away, I expected only find one. I found multiple of them. Let's fix it. So in this case, I am expecting to find 2. So I'm going to tweak this query a little bit. All of these queries follow the same convention. You have a get by text. You have a get all by text. And that's exactly what we're going to use. So get all by text tells me I'm expecting at least one, but one or more of them. There's an alternative to it called query all by text, which is 0 or more. So in this case, I'm going to say I'm going to get all by text. I'm going to use my should call again. I'm going to say it should have length equal to 2 because I'm expecting 2 of them. And that should fix this up. This is kind of an arbitrary example because in this case, it's okay to have duplicate to-dos. And you probably wouldn't need to enforce that they couldn't, and it wouldn't fail in real life. This is something to make Cypress happy, so it's kind of an arbitrary example, but it's the quickest one I found to kind of play with get all by text for you. But you can kind of see how powerful that can be. If you have an instance where I have a list of states, for example, and I know there shouldn't be any duplicates, then I can, in my tests, I can say find Texas. And if that comes back with more than one, you know there's something wrong. Somebody's broken an API call somewhere else. So we have our duplicate. I'm going to set us up for our next phase by adding another to-do that is different. I'm going to call this one to-do 2. Should I rename that symbol? Excuse me. I'll show you one of these, and we'll go back to the other one. Get by text. And when this is done, I should have 3 to-dos listed up there, 2 duplicates. Great. So the last piece of functionality I want for my to-do is to be able to delete them. And one of the reasons I added a duplicate in there is so we can try and confirm more easily that it deleted the correct one. So what I'm going to do, so go back into our to-do list and we'll add a delete button. Nothing fancy. Oops. Delete. Give ourselves a method called, shockingly enough, delete to do. Delete to do. It's just going to be a splice, so we'll get the index. Find index. ID. We'll cool. Let's go see if that works. Cool. It's reloading. One of the other neat kind of things that I like when I'm working on these apps too, like I just lost all my state. Oh man, I was going to delete one of those. Because I'm kind of building my state as I go and testing in line, it's as easy to retest my test. I can jump right into do my deletes work. No, they did not. No, we broke something. Misspelled to do. Again, it's just a browser. I'm able to pull in the Chrome DevTools, no problem. Who saw that and didn't tell me? Edward? It's all, that's absolutely correct. It's all part of the talk. Good job. Let's run that again. So to-dos, and we're good. So again, just like before, think about what I'm doing, how would I ask somebody else to do that? I want you to click the second delete button. So let's go create a test for that. Say it deletes a to-do. Actually, to be more explicit, it deletes the second to-do. So when you find that button, so we're going to say cy to get by text. Look for non-case sensitive delete. Actually, it's going to get all by text because there's more than one. And this one's a little tricky. It has built-in methods to give you the first one real easily and the last one real easily. To get a specific number of an array of found elements is actually this method called EQ, and I don't know why. Just remember, EQ is what you're looking for. So I'm looking for the second element because we're in JavaScript, zero-based array. It's the EQ one. So that's going to get me the second delete button, and then I will click it. Cool. Let's see if that works. Great. So you see it deleted the second to do for us. Now it's doing the action we had. How do we confirm that? So I'm probably going to look for this one. The easy test for me is just make sure both to do one and to do two are on the screen. If I use get by text for both of those, we've got all of our assertions wrapped up in a pretty nice, neat little call. So I'm going to elevate these constants into the describe scope so they're available to everybody. And we can just say cy get by text to do one and to do two. Great. So that worked. Now I'm going to show you a little bit, some more kind of contrived examples to kind of show you some of the hopefully some of the pitfalls you might fall into, because our app now is feature complete, and this is effectively tested enough, in my opinion. But we're going to make up some arbitrary examples so I can show you some of the edge cases. So let's say, for example, in all of our tests, we want to make sure that the correct amount of to-dos is there at every step of the way. So I need a way to find each of those listed elements and count them. So if I look at my structure, because it's just a div tag, I probably don't want to try and just count divs. And I said before, I don't want to marry something to a CSS. So one of the kind of escapes you have when you need something in code just for testing is you can use a data attribute called test ID. And we'll call these test items. To-do item. And this is nice because data attributes are part of the HTML spec. Like nothing's going to depend on them. It shouldn't interrupt anything else. You can beat data anything you want. Test ID is something that Cypress expects by default. So that's why we use it. And it's pretty explicit. If somebody comes in here later on and they see that you have this data test ID, what does that sound like? Well, it's probably something to do with testing. I'm going to leave it alone. But it's also not married to displaying the website at all. It's not CSS. So if somebody changes the way it looks by moving to a different CSS library, you're not going to break anything. It gives you a convenient tool to find things. And you can use it everywhere, but I would say probably don't do that. Be kind of gross to muddy up all your HTML by putting a test ID on everything inside the app. But in this case, it makes sense because there are multiples of them and I don't have a clean way to try and find them. So we'll start at the bottom here. I'm going to do cy.get by test ID. Excuse me, get all by test ID. Hold it. Do item. I want to make sure it has a count of 3, so we should have length equal to 3. I failed. What did I do wrong? Because 3, oh, we got 2. I wrote it wrong. I forgot that I deleted one. It should have a length of 2. But look at how nice that is, how clean that tells you. When you hover over this, you see how it highlights in the main pane the things that it found when it ran through that step. So I get all by test ID to do item, and there's the 2 that it found on the screen in real time. It's really cool. It's really a pleasant testing experience. We'll change that to 2. I'm gonna, with wild, reckless abandon, I'm gonna go ahead and update the rest of these and assume they'll work. It's 3. I give it a 2. Switch to 1. And everything's fine. Click through here, we can see we found just the 1, found 2 of them, there found 3 of them. Cool. I think there's probably one more edge case I'll show you real quick because we still got a little bit of time. Because it kind of stumped me and it's not super intuitive. Like let's go back in. I have this get by text to-do list. I'm going to make that break and show you how you might be able to fix it a little easier. So let's say we put this inside of a header tag. So we know I want it to be a header. And then beneath that, I give some descriptive text about our app that says, this app is to maintain your to-do list. Awesome. Well, now my test is going to fail because I'm using get by text on to-do list again. But I don't necessarily want to say, okay, there should be 2 of them. Because what if we end up using the phrase to-do list all over the place in the app? It doesn't make any sense. What I'm really trying to say here is my header should have to-do list in it. And the way you kind of scope a test to just an element is using a thing called within. So when I go in here to this visit, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring back cy.get. And in this case, I do have to grab an element. I put it in a header tag. And I'm going to call within. And within is a promise that accepts a function or parameter. And when this function is called, it will scope all the Cypress calls inside of it to only inside of the div that it found or the array of divs that it found. And so now when I call this, that should fix my test. Excellent. As you can see that when I mouse over here, first it finds the header and then it finds the text within the header. And so maybe that feels like I'm kind of double speaking with saying, hey, don't tell someone to look for a particular element. But I think in this case, it's kind of more founded because somebody would have told you, I need the company's name to be in the header bar. So that makes sense. You would tell somebody, go find the header bar. And maybe you have an ID instead. You could use an HTML ID just the same way. It's how you can scope your calls. But this within functionality here stumped me for a minute. Because these are chained, it kind of feels like you should be able to say get header dot get by text after that. Because it'll let you, like that's a legitimate call, but it's going to fail. It's still going to be calling that on the window context at the top. But that's it. That's all I got for my talk. Do you guys have any questions? Concerns? Yes, please.
So I noticed in the Cypress docs, they're very clear that, hey, this is an integration testing framework. Don't it's not meant for unit testing.
Right.
But I know people do that. It seems like it'd be handy for unit testing.
Sure.
Do you have any like experience doing that?
I have not. I have in my queue list, Kent Dodds wrote a course on testing JavaScript that is fantastic. It's a little, it's expensive depending on what you think is expensive, but it's like $200 for the whole thing, and worth every penny. I strongly recommend get it. He's an incredible teacher who's very good at testing. I digress. He has a blog post about exactly that, using Cypress as a unit testing tool. I haven't read it yet, so I don't know. But I wanted to say that that's out there. If you want to look for Kent Dodds, he has a probably amazing article about using it as a unit testing tool. I know it will run Chrome headless as well, so you can run it in CI, but I've not done it myself. And also that testing library, there's an extension for Jest as well. If you want to stay in Jest, write your unit test there and get a lot of those same helpers, they're in Jest as well. They're fantastic. Yeah.
Do they have a way to also like record interactions within the browser for different spread?
How do you mean?
For example, I have some testing frameworks that you can just record yourself navigating website.
Oh, like Selenium used to, where like you do the thing and it tracks what you were doing?
They also offer that.
I don't think so.
Just for
Yeah, and honestly, have you done that before? It's been a while since I've done that, and it felt like magic the first time. It stopped working almost immediately. And I'd be hesitant because the only way that a machine can think to find where you clicked is going to be either by coordinates or by XSS path, maybe. And now you're locking in your test to the structure of HTML. If you wrap anything around whatever you clicked on or typed in anything else, it's going to fail. So
it's really like people affiliated with programming, right?
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a good question, though. I didn't remember to repeat the questions in the mics. We were recording this, and somebody's going to hear something out of context explanation. So they see me go, you know what? How dare you, sir? You can leave. Next question. And then they want to know what the joke was. He asked if there was something like Selenium where you could click and record your clicks and auto-generate it for you. Probably, but I'm scared.
Also, do they have like a sort of packet selector?
A what?
Well, that we kind of do, right? Maybe that's what we get all my text and stuff. Do they have a lot of text and selectors?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they got a bunch. Yeah, that's actually in the testing library. It's testing-library.com.
Is that also maintained by Cypress?
No, it's maintained by Kent Dodds and a handful of other people.
So you can actually use that within other testing.
Absolutely. Yeah, it has excellent integration with React, unfortunately, because Kent Dodds is an old school React guy, so he writes everything React first. So like he wrote the port for React himself, whereas the Vue port and the Jest port was written by the community, but they're still very good. I've used both of them and they're excellent.
It feels a lot like
Volta?
Yeah.
I've never used it.
Mocha.
Oh, Mocha. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. Cypress uses Mocha assertions by default.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so all like the shoulds there, that's all, excuse me, not Mocha, it's all Chai, I believe. But it ropes in Chai.
You could also use it, right?
You could. Yeah, you can use any assertion library you like. And its syntax very closely resembles, I believe, Chai, and they structure it very similar to Mocha as well. Cypress does. Anybody else?
What was that command that you did? You like we jumped into a command spot or something?
Oh, the one where I said, hey, don't ask any questions until the end?
Yeah.
Okay. Like how so that's a, oh, sure. So the magic command for,
No, you added a command or like you ordered something at the end. The command JS one? Yeah. When you got to when you got testing library, you had added to the site.
oh, added to the commands file, yeah. This thing right here where it opens up the menus.
No. You went into yeah.
Oh man, what did I do? I thought I just started typing. I mean, it is going to autocomplete for me because it's VS Code automatically picks up everything you put in node modules.
What is this command file?
Commands are kind of like, think of them as plugins for Cypress.
Okay.
And so the testing library group wrote a plugin or a command extension for Cypress that lets you have the get by text sort of DOM manipulation or selectors. And that's what this is here. Is add telling on Cypress.
Okay. So, I mean, this isn't in like a no modules file. This is in your project.
The commands is yes.
Okay.
And that's given to you automatically by Vue CLI when you create it. Okay, sorry. There we go.
Okay, thank you.
And it does that when you select end-to-end integration testing when you first spool up a project, or if you add the integration testing plugin via Vue CLI, it'll do all that for you automatically.
Cool. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
if I were to like add Cypress to like an existing project directory, how would it look? What do I need to do? Like, just npm install and npm
Pretty much. Their documentation is really nice.
It's pretty simple.
I honestly think I've only installed Cypress from scratch one time, but I don't remember it being that painful. But it is pretty much install it like yarn add Cypress or npmi Cypress as a dev tool, and then writing the commands to go run it. Like if we look at most of the magic, I believe is actually in package.json. Now see, they hide it from you. This is one of those things that kind of bugs me. I can't see what VCLI Cypress is actually doing. But if I'm not mistaken, that is effectively just saying npm run Cypress. I think. But their documentation is really good. You're going to go add it to your project at work? You totally should. Cypress rules. Anything else? You may clap. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So we're good. We can keep hanging out as long as you like. You want to go, you can go. I wrote one of the wild things I had when I first spooled this up is I had the idea. I do a thing when I build things locally normally where I run JSON server locally and use JSON files as a fake API layer to interact with, and it gives me real data to play with. And I was going to do that with this, but that's when it took me like over an hour. But I actually built a plugin for the Vue CLI to give you that automatically. And that was pretty cool. If you want to see that, I can do that real quick. Just part of our show and tell, part of this show. Now we're completely off script. I'm going to cheat though, because I don't know how to install a local plugin locally. So we're going to use a Vue UI. Anybody here ever play with the Vue UI? It's really cool. Like they put a bunch of work into this thing, and I'm super impressed with them. If you've never seen it before, this comes by default with the Vue CLI. Just run once you. They have a dark mode? Of course they do. Where is that? Where's the dark mode? Now I got to do it. You brought this up. Oh, come on, man.
Configuration.
Yeah. Oh man, there's a lot of stuff in here. We'll come back to this. Okay, we'll go back to our plugins. Search. What's that? Okay, now everybody. The community demands dark mode. Community is not getting dark mode.
Is that just an OS thing? Like you set your max dark mode?
You can, like, yes, but also somebody apparently has built a CSS theme for Vue UI to make it dark mode. It's all the rage these days. So I'm going to go add a plugin. If for nothing else, one of the things I love running the Vue UI tool that we see here is that it's the easiest way I found to find plugins for Vue, because you have this nice search here. Oh, let me find something for TypeScript. It's like, cool. It's going out and searching the NPM to find TypeScript-based plugins for the Vue CLI, and any one of these you can add right here. So for that alone, Vue UI is worth it to me. But mine is local, so let me go credits. Credits. Local JSON server. Cool. I'm going to bore you with the configuration stuff right now. So what this is doing is it's actually going to go out and crash my browser, apparently. Oh no, sorry, I was running a Vue UI inside of my Cypress-owned version of Chrome. And so when it did an install, it shut down the server to restart my view package. Don't do that. What's that? Just go with it again. Let's try this again. Cool. Stick around this time, would you? Are you really installed? I don't believe it. So hopefully that is going to go download everything I need to run JSON server locally. Looks like it. Cool, let's find out. Yeah, I'm not sure if it installed JSON server correctly, but we'll find out together. Oh, looks like it. Yeah, so this is JSON server spooling up. Has anybody ever played the JSON server before? Yeah, it's in an NPM package. It's a simple web server that you can point at basically JSON files, and it stubs out a REST interface on top of the structure of that JSON file. So it lets you have a fake API locally to play with very, very quickly. And I've built a command that runs that and Cypress in parallel. See, I broke my tests. I also overrode a bunch of stuff, so ignore that the test is broken for now. This right here is one of the things that the plugin adds. This is also why it's not on NPM yet, because it still has a lot of work to do, which is why I didn't do it earlier as well. But this is actually pulling from a JSON file. I'll show you that real quick. So it's just a JSON file, and the way JSON server works is it's an object, well, it's JSON, but each one of these top level properties is going to become a route in your web server that it spools up for you automatically. And it handles all of the basic CRUD REST functions for you. It gives you, as long as you adhere to the REST spec, you can use this as a local web server to develop on. And I've also, in my plugin, given an example API, this JSON server thing. I wrapped up some nicer interactions because I like to use fetch, and fetch by default doesn't parse JSON, so it's got a little fetch wrapper on it to parse everything as JSON because that's what we're using, and run gets and posts very easily. But basically, oh, I love Axios. Fetch is going to become the standard, so I'm trying to get more used to it, and that's it. There's no other reason. Fetch's current interaction is kind of a pain in the butt to work with, especially when you're writing unit tests. It's not the best. Like, I've switched back to Axios just for testing alone. Because you can mock Axios easy. I mean, you can mock Axios without doing anything because a community member built a mock for it already. That's very nice. So I can just say, cool, install that, include that, and we're done. Whereas with Fetch, you've got to write it yourself, and it's kind of a pain. You know, mocking out global objects, and I don't like it. You'll see something at the top here. I polyfill Fetch because, as a nice to have for you guys, not all testing environments have Fetch available to them, or the window object available to them. Like Fetch fails in Cypress. I forget why. There's an explanation for it, but it needs to be polyfilled. And I believe it fails in Jest as well. So polyfill it, do what I'm doing here, or I'm just overwriting it if it doesn't exist. So this is a very simple workaround if you want to use Fetch and not pull your hair out while you're testing. Anyways, I wanted to show you that file that we're actually seeing, where this is coming from. I'll call it an example. Yes, this guy's just importing the API. Part of what I've done in the plugin is that I'm actually giving I'm actually creating the alias for you. an aliasing API to that file I built so that you don't have to try and find it every single time. It also sets you up for, I gave a talk last year around dynamically using Webpack aliases to dynamically select an API layer based on your environment. So when you're using an alias in Webpack here, I can say import API, and in this case, it's looking at my JSON server file. But it's easier for me to go into, you would do this in Vue config.js for using a Vue CLI-based application, or it's just a Webpack route alias is what we're looking for in Webpack, and you just say literally, if process and environment is production, look at this file instead. And that lets you have dynamic calls based on your environment. So for me, when I'm working locally, I want to use JSON server because I have access to the data, I can see it, I can manipulate it. But then when I push out production, I'm going to want to look at whatever production is hitting. If it goes out to a staging environment, hit the staging database, testing, so on and so forth. And this lets you do that without putting that code inside of your code. And it's a really nice setup that I've only ever had in my own personal projects because real projects are old and that didn't exist at the time. But yeah, that's it. There's my little plugin. It was fun to write, but it's still kind of kludgy. If I ever get it totally squared away, we'll have another show and tell on that so you guys can see it. Local JSON server. It's not on NPM yet, so I'm not going to put it out there until it doesn't overwrite everything you wrote like it just did to me. There's way to make. I wanted to make it so it'd show you the example files. You can say, here how it works, but right now it's just obliterating everything you did. Like, that's not a good experience for anybody throwing their work away. Yeah, cool. Anybody else have anything you want to share? Don't do that again. We've clapped enough for one night. My ego's big enough as it is. But no, man, thank you guys for coming. We have the place until 9. You don't have to stay. You can talk amongst yourselves. If you want to ask me questions outside of like in front of everybody, we can do that too. Don't play with my heart, Edward. Okay, let's try configuration. Is it maybe under like the big overview? None of that looks right. Oh wait. Oh, Edward.
There we go.
It's way down here in the corner. Look at that. That is better. Look at that. Look at how much better that is. I feel so cool now. Like, that is the best. Look at that guy.
You can actually do all your run build, all the stuff in there.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
It's
let me.
a nice little GUI interface for it. I mean, you don't need GUI interfaces for things, but it's there.
I do, yeah, but I like it. He knows that I like.
Yeah, it does.
There you go. Yeah, you know, like yours.
Like, I want to figure out how to hook into this.
It's all right. You need great that.
Because if you run serve from the Vue UI, it gives you all this cool stuff here. Like, here's the size of your assets and all your dependencies. Gives you a dependency graph, but
I feel like there's probably some to do with that. Probably like.
yeah, but there's got to be a way to hook into it yourself. Because like when you run Cypress test from here too, it gives you a nicer layout. It's got like, the icon, stuff like that. But because I've wrapped it myself to run it, you lose some of those nice to haves, and that kind of bugs me. It's like, man, I want to be able to run local JSON server and get the specs that you're giving me here when I run serve directly. And I'm sure there's a way to do it. I just haven't found it yet, but it's cool. It's got list all your dependencies and stuff. You can jump, straight to the application from here. It's dope. You guys can play with Vue UI more. They put a ton of work into it. It's really cool. Doesn't make you feel very codery though, clicking on buttons.
Need more DOS looking stuff.
Right? Ugh.
Matrix looking, by the way, Matrix Forward has been announced.
Yeah, I'm aware. Oh my gosh. No, they're coming back even though they're dead. I don't know. It's the movies. Nobody's dead in the movies. Cool. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and shut this thing down.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys. Thanks for having us proof. Appreciate it.